Well, thank you. People don't often clap when I walk into a room, so it's great. What a great way to start. My name is Stacie Pratschner, Community Development Director for the City of Blaine. I have the pleasure of knowing a lot of people in the room, whether we've worked on projects together, you're a council member, or part of the leadership team. Michael is with us today as well. Just a little bit about me. I have worked for the City of Blaine for just a little over 3 years now. That time has flown by. It has gone very quickly, and that's because Blaine is a busy and it's a really exciting place to be working right now. I've got over 16 years of experience working in local jurisdictions as a planner. Before then, I was private sector in archaeology, and so I got a bit of a wide breadth of experience in terms of applying some of those skill sets and knowledge to the position. Just want to give a couple notes on technology. We are video recording today. We're also recording sound, so I'm going to try to speak as clearly as I can. I know sometimes feedback can be tricky, so hopefully that's all smooth while we do this. I want to also thank Sheila for arranging to have me speak today. Thank you so much. Just a pleasure to appear in front of the chamber. So today, what I want to talk about is it's the development snapshot here in the city of Blaine. As everyone knows, because you can just look out your window or when you're driving by, we're seeing a lot of growth in the city right now. So my goal with this presentation today is to put that growth in the context of City Council's direction. We're going to talk about some of the strategic planning and priorities there. I'm going to spend just a very little bit of time on the regulatory context of these development projects. We'll try to keep things focused on the actual work happening itself. And then we'll just open up some time for some Q&A. So let's start with talking about strategic planning. We'll do some regulatory framework, talk about that and how community development services, my department specifically, helps implement the intent of council and the city manager. We'll look at development in Blaine. I'm focusing on residential development today, but I want to talk about commercial development as well. And then I want to just leave lots of time for questions and answers. Typically, my answer sometimes when questions come up in forums like these is, it depends, or that's a great question, let me research and get back to you. So if you can depend on probably hearing that a little bit, especially if we start getting into like details of projects specifically, but I'm happy to answer any questions I have in the time that we have today. So first, earlier in February, as probably a lot of you are aware, the City Council, the leadership team, the department heads, and the city manager held a City Council retreat, and that was to establish our priorities going forward. And those priorities get implemented by the city manager and then by each of the department heads: Public Works, Finance, the police, planning, IT. And so what were those priority areas? Infrastructure upgrades. As everyone is probably aware in this room, the city has some very critical infrastructure upgrades that need to be completed in order for us to support the kind of growth that we're seeing in the city. The sewer out in East Blaine, we're taking a look, and we just updated the water system comprehensive plan. We're taking a look at electricity. The next priority area, regulatory and development standards reform. Those of you who have developed or done projects in Blaine are probably very aware of this, but there's a lot of sections in our regulatory requirements, our development code, and then also the Public Works development standards that simply need to be brought up to date and modernized. And so we're doing it. Yep, Grant is nodding his head yes. And so we are going to be doing that legislative work this year as well. Housing affordability and availability. Right now, the city is in a contract right now to develop a housing action plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then economic development. You can see from this list that these are not mutually exclusive items, and almost every one of these priority areas can really be bundled under that economic development. Houses for people who want to work here and live here and play here. So now that you know how City Council has asked us to direct our work for the year, let's talk a little bit about how my department specifically is involved in the development that you're seeing out in the city right now. So my department has 5 core functions. We do legislation and policy development, land use and building permits, which is what we'll focus on today. We have economic and tourism development. Of course, the chamber works closely with Alex Winker in that regard. Management of tourism and parks, and then of course land use code enforcement. So the land use and building permits, that's the development, and that's the catalyst for the development we're seeing right now. So let's take a step back into the regulatory environment and talk about where those land use and development permits kind of fall within this land use pyramid. We operate under the Growth Management Act, and that means that pretty much all jurisdictions in Western Washington recognize 3 different kinds of land use decisions. We've got the legislative work, which is the work that the Planning Commission and the City Council does. That's where the rules get set. How big are the setbacks? How high does the building get to be? What uses are allowed? That's where the fundamental planning decisions are made. What are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about, to the top of this pyramid, we're going to talk about the development permits. Development and land use permits implement the rules. So all the projects that you're seeing today are going to fall in this section of the pyramid. The implementation of the rules that have been adopted by the City Council through public process. I know this is a little small to see. This is a pretty simple table, but I think the numbers are powerful and speak to the kind of level of development that we're seeing in the city. We have a number of projects going on in East, Central, and West Blaine. In the next slide, I'm going to bring up a map and we'll kind of do a heat map of that. But residential development and interest in residential development in the city it's a very high level right now. As far as building permits, my department's already processed more building permits this time this year than we did almost in the whole of last year. That's the kind of levels that we're seeing of interest in development. We have a number of large subdivisions. Of course, the one everyone is most familiar with is East Maple Ridge. It's been renamed the Ridge at Harbor Hills. That's 353 new units. Of course, there's the Grandest Pond development. For some of you who've been in the community for a while, Grandest Pond has been a project since 1996 when the annexation originally happened. That developer's agreement on what kind of housing and the units that would be out there was established many years ago. And we're seeing the first phase of that build interest and potentially be developed. We've got quite a lot of development happening in Semiahmoo. Semiahmoo over the past 5 years has represented close to 25% of the total housing stock within the city. That trend is probably set to remain. There's a very high level of interest in additional development out there, new ones, as well as finishing out some developments such as Sea Smoke and also within Prestwick Woods. So not just single family, but multifamily as well. We have a new proposal that's going to go in front of the hearings examiner. So if we're thinking back to that pyramid, that's the middle of that pyramid, that quasi-judicial decision making. That is going to be a multifamily project right between Ludwig and Odell, and that's going to be 53 new units there. So let's talk about a little bit about what all these numbers mean and all these names of projects mean. Approved projects up here, so build out anticipated within the next 5 years, Sea Smoke, Muirfield, and Woodbury, which are also Semiahmoo projects, Drayton Harbor Division 2, and then East Maple Ridge, the Ridge at Harbor Hills. That's over 400 new units that we anticipate within the next 5 years. We do have a number of projects where we know build out is potentially going to happen that we're not certain. We have active projects under review, and then we have potential projects where there's been either community conferences or been some kind of pre-application meeting, or but that haven't formally been applied for yet. And that's a lot. And that's 2,800 units total. And again, not within the next 5 years, maybe not in the next 10 years, but that's the kind of level and interest and activity that we're seeing within the city of Blaine. That's enough units to meet our population projections for the next 20 years. Put that in context for everyone. Okay, so I had mentioned some of the locations, so let's get a little more granular as far as where some of that development is happening. That's very fuzzy, so and you probably can't see the stars that I've put on there, but Semiahmoo, East Blaine, as we continue to do those infrastructure updates, we're going to we know that we are seeing more development. This is an area that the city manager specifically is working closely with the county and other groups to target affordable housing product and available housing product as well. And then the multifamily here, closer between Ludwig and Odell. So I've touched on residential, so let's talk a little bit about commercial projects as well. So most everyone here is probably aware that the Gateway property that's been sold to White Leisure, we've got McDonald's and Taco Bell coming in and also an auto store. Yorkies has been picked up by another owner and they have stated an intent to move forward with that development, the gas station and the RV, probably the RV dump site to go along with that. We've got the Freeman building going up downtown. That's one of the first new buildings in downtown to really apply those new central business district downtown design standards that were adopted by the city in 2018. And then I wanted to make a note, though it's a little more infrastructure related, on the downtown revitalization project. This group's probably aware that we've got grant money and we also receive money from the state to do a Peace Portal downtown revitalization project. So looking at improvements of sewer laterals, streetscapes, looking at complete streets, ADA upgrades. We're going through the RFQ process right now, and so that's a really exciting development for downtown. We anticipate that we'll be going through design and planning this year and then looking at construction next year. Okay. That was quick. Like I said, I wanted to leave lots of time for questions, comment, discussion. A correction that Michael caught on here. This phone number should be 8311, not 3811. So don't call that number. I don't know who you're going to get if you call that number. But you can also email me. And if you email me, my cell phone number is also on the bottom there. So I want to thank you for everyone's attention. And I'm happy to take any questions. Have a discussion. Thank you. Yes.
I have one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was maybe 15 years ago or what, but
yeah.
I just remember being very involved in finding out about downtown parking.
Yes.
And then there, it wasn't an issue.
Right. Right.
Now, is that coming back up again as a concern?
So, I think it will come up as a concern. And so let me answer the question first, and then let me give you some background on that. So since in the time I've been working here, the city has had in place, and this is memorialized in code, a waiver for commercial parking requirements in the downtown core. So if you're doing residential downtown, you'll need to accommodate for residential parking, but we've waived those commercial parking requirements for now. I've seen kind of reactions, I think, and I know we've got some council members here today too, and maybe they might have some thoughts or feedback. I've heard discussion about wanting to continue to encourage less parking, but I've also heard discussions about, well, maybe we should be looking at a shared parking area or some kind of different parking design standards. So I think the subject is coming up, but I think it's a bit of an open question right now in which direction the city might be going. Yeah, Carol.
When you're talking about the revitalization of downtown, is that including redoing the sidewalks and cleaning them up and leveling bricks? We get a lot of comments from the public about that.
Sure, yes. So yes, the downtown revitalization project is going to include those sidewalk improvements, including ADA compliance. We're going to be working with the consultant to really be looking at, like I said, that complete street concept. So street furniture, multimodal, etc. We want to also create consistency with the look in downtown. So there'll be some fundamental decision making that happens in a public forum about what should these streets look like. Thanks, Carol. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
So I know Mike does a massive amount of mowing in town, but who's responsible for, and I think Blaine is absolutely beautiful, but every one of the trees up and down Blaine, it's got 6 or 7 inches of grass growing around it. And I know you got enough on your plate, Mike, but who's supposed to help out with keeping that looking nice? Sure.
And so, Michael, I'll go ahead and take this question if you want to. So our Public Works Maintenance and Operations team, they're responsible for managing our right-of-ways, and whether that's removing things out of them or keeping them at a level of service and keeping them maintained. Did you have anything to add, Michael, to that?
No, just that we were aware of them being less than fully maintained. In fact, it was on my list of things just today. I was noticing downtown getting taller and taller. We need to talk with our maintenance and operations manager. We transitioned from having all of that be being done by a contractor to being done in-house. And
good feedback.
That transition is still kind of bumpy.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Scott.
So kind of a follow-up question on
Yeah.
the parking side of it.
Right.
So I've done development in Barclay Village, and in those areas where they're trying to develop a walking community,
Right.
it makes perfect sense. They try to reduce the number of parking spaces or
Sure.
try to get people to use mass transit, the bicycles, and the whole
Right.
thing. And I understand that effort. In Blaine, right off of I-5, where, you know, a big part of our economy has to do with tourists.
Right.
Tourists from Washington and from Vancouver, and they just don't have the ability to interact with our community without a vehicle. And I'm just curious, you know, we have the skate park property, the library property, all of that property, plus the old city hall. Has there been some serious discussion about designating some parking? And I mean, it can become revenue generating parking, but those of us that are kind of working with business owners and future business owners are looking at the downtown, and we remember before COVID that the downtown could get full of parking pretty quickly.
Right.
We've had some comments from George, who owns the Thai place. He's extremely concerned. So I'm
Sure.
just wondering, I understand the concept, but
Right.
this is, people don't go to Barclay from Vancouver. But Blaine is really going to, in the long term, just looking at this, you know, people are
Right.
going to be coming here for an experience. So shouldn't that be a big part of Blaine's strategy, not just to create a walking community, but also to accommodate people that want to get in on, you know, everything that's here?
Yeah, I think that is it's a great point to make, and I think as we start to work on specifically the downtown revitalization project, and we're thinking about that multimodal, which would include cars, which includes bikes, which includes people walking, and if that's kind of something we want to, if council decides they want to implement, you know, looking at that, maybe those big shared parking areas, I think it's an incredibly valid point and should be part of the equation. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
Stacie,
Yeah.
it seems like the questions are wrapping up. I thought I would mention you mentioned affordable housing.
Yes.
Particularly in the East Blaine area. We are looking in other parts of the city, but I wanted to mention that that's primarily what's being termed as workforce housing. The average median income for our area is about $49,000 for a single wage earner household. A double wage earner household would be obviously about double that. And those units that we're looking at in the workforce housing range are right at around 100% of the average median income. So basically someone making about $80,000 to $120,000 a year, which sounds like a real lot of money, but for a family of four, it's difficult to get into a house and have that down payment. So we're looking mostly in that what we call workforce housing area, rather than the affordable housing tends to be less than 60% of the average median income. So incomes of like $20,000, $30,000 a year. We have some of that in the city. What the county really lacks is that other niche. When you go from truly affordable, low income kind of housing up to I can afford it, pretty much any house that's an entry level house income. There's a gap in between.
Yep.
Michael, have you seen any other cities actually do well at creating that kind of housing stock in Washington State or Oregon?
I'm sure that there definitely are some. One of the things is it's a struggle that people call the housing there the missing middle, where a lot of it has to do with not having townhouses, not having condos, not having cottages, smaller properties. But even right here in Washington County, there are some really good examples of the workforce housing projects, mostly done by the Luncheon Community Land Trust, where they help people get into homes, but they actually have equity ownership in those homes. They buy them, and then they, with arrangements that are on the deed, they stay affordable through the time. And when that person sells the house, it also goes to someone who's eligible at that income bracket. So there are some in Bellingham primarily in our county.
And is it on the state's docket at all to help? Because I mean, the biggest problem in Washington County, because I mean, residential development here is that, you know, the wetlands issues, the stormwater management, the energy code enhancements that they keep on making. Like for Seattle and King County, it doesn't matter. Kirkland, you know, they're going to build up 50, 60 stories. But for a community like ours, it's impossible to ever make that any type of affordable.
The
what the state legislature do is make the wetland buffers even more. Like, they just push them from like 100 feet to like, it's going to like 200 feet or something.
300.
Worse for up here, but I haven't seen them actually do anything to help with the land use. Well, I don't know if have you guys seen anything?
Well, I would say from a development standpoint, increasing wetland buffers from you could mitigate them down to 100 feet, and you're saying now it's going to be 300 feet. And then between that and stormwater issues, on-site treatment, development is extremely difficult.
Yep.
And the cost, and then, units above 1,500 square feet fall under the new energy code, which is 5.5 credits.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just this massive pile-on of requirements and less land that's developable.
Right.
That's just pinching
Right.
from all sides. It's
Right.
a shame, though, that people that are working jobs have to have some sort of a state subsidized or federal subsidized housing, and then they don't get to experience the benefits of the full benefits of homeownership and
Right.
appreciation.
Right.
And it would be really good for Blaine. I've worked on this issue for many years, and I've got some ideas where municipalities can provide some relief, and then to developers or to builders, and then in turn they can pass that on, and have a controlled appreciation return on investment. But so that, this is a big issue. It'd be nice to see something other than Land Trust or Habitat for Humanity or one of these other places that has a reputation such that people don't want it in their neighborhood. We've got to find a way to meld it, it seems to me. But I had a question. I've never heard the word mandatory ADUs. Could you explain that?
Essentially saying that that anywhere that you can have a single family home, you can have an ADU.
Okay.
That the city can't say it's not allowed on lots under a certain size, or it's not allowed in this neighborhood. Basically, the state just saying it's something you have to allow on every single family home.
Makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
So what's actively being done, or is anything actively being done to help make housing affordable? And I don't necessarily mean, we're going to cordon off a corner of the city and call it affordable housing.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
when you talk to business owners, they say, I can't bring people who don't already have a mortgage here.
Right.
Because they can't afford to move in, and
Right.
they're looking at the down payments on these houses going, it's just not possible.
Right.
What's kind of being done in that direction, or is there anything being done?
Sure. So the city right now, and specifically this is work with the city manager, the economic and development coordinator, and then our consultant Paul Schisler. We're looking at a housing action plan. The county has one too. It's usually called a HAP for short. And so that housing action plan is going to identify specific actions and strategies that we can use to build more available housing stock. And so there is a look right now at redeveloping some of the downtown properties. Paul's going to be looking the City Hall site, the skate park site as well. We anticipate there'll be some recommendations for some legislative updates. That's something that we're working on as part of the legislative docket this year as well. And so we want to do some regulatory reform. We want to streamline some permit processes. We have some pretty some processes that are probably a few years out of date, I would say. I mean, they're perfectly legal, but they are quite a heavy burden if you're a developer or a builder, and that time is money, right? And the time that a developer spends going through that process is more money that has to be spent, which translates into more expensive housing. So I anticipate we'll get more recommendations from Paul too on that point. Hope I explained that, or
it sounds like there's a plan to make a plan, but I'm not hearing,
exactly.
I'm not hearing anything concrete.
Okay.
When I talk to young people who
Right.
make a decent living, and I talk about home ownership with them, they kind of roll their eyes and laugh at me.
Right.
'Cause it's like, not around here.
Right.
Maybe if I move back to where my cousins are, and middle Midwest somewhere, yeah, sure, but Washington, Western Washington.
Yeah.
No, and the new stuff that's coming online, I'm a former banker. It's all jungle zone territory, all of it. There's nothing coming online that's kind of that middle of the road for your average family. And so I'm just kind of looking around and going, well, what's the next step? What
Right.
happens
The
next?
problem with Washington is the state. the land use. I mean, as I said, once you deal with the wetlands and get into stormwater, I mean, it's impossible to find a piece. Like I just went to, my brother-in-law lives in Hilton Head, South Carolina. So during COVID, all of a sudden it just took off like crazy. Because people from New York and Boston started moving down there. But like, they don't have the land use restrictions and they're right on the water, just like we are. And they've just got, like, they just let people build and develop like row homes and single family homes that they can make them, you know, because the permitting process is easier, the land use process is easier, they're like 300 grand, right? 300 grand, brand new homes. It's just never going to happen in Washington State unless the state gets behind it. Like, there's only so much the city can do as well.
Well, I guess that's my question is how much city jurisdiction matters?
The only
If we are our own, you know.
The only thing the city can do is help with density and, you know, on 10,000 square foot lot like Bellingham, they give you 4 townhomes up in Blaine, like, you can only get 2, right? Like, just really, that's all they can do is help with
Well,
density.
but that's not a little thing. There are low impact cottage developments that municipalities have looked at a significant piece of property and said, we're going to allow a stunning amount of density here for these small footprint, low impact housing developments that where all the water basically is filtered by the indigenous flora. And there's walking paths and pervious cobblestone streets. And you know, the municipalities are the ones that have to have the vision to go, you know what? We're going to create an expedited process to encourage this type of development. And you know, people, I lived in Japan for 2 years, and 800 square foot home in Japan's a big home. And the truth of the matter is, couples, small families can live in 600 to 900 square feet, be very comfortable if it's designed right, and they can have their own house and not be on top of each other if it's this kind of development. So has Blaine considered kind of proactively looking at that and saying, if $1 million piece of property instead of 4 houses or 8 single family residences suddenly will accommodate 40 cottages, what does that mean? And I can tell you from a developer's perspective, if that's available on a piece of property by California Creek or something, that would be really beautiful. I mean, I could put together a group of people that would love, including myself, that would love to build something like that out that adds to the charm of the city, but also answers the question, where's the $350,000 home?
There is none.
And
it's all talk.
So that kind of thing can produce affordable housing that's very livable. But the city, you have to create it, like you said, an expedited process for that, and you have to be a little visionary. It's been done in Oregon. If it can be done in Oregon, it can be done in Washington.
Yeah. So I think what Scott is referring to is something that in planner speak we refer to as the infill toolkit. And so infill, so our existing zones and looking at increasing density, that's not a conversation I've been privy to yet. In the time that I've been working here, you know, we have allowed densities and allowed uses, and development is taking place under those regulations and guidelines. I think you bring up a really good comment too, and maybe this will go back to Mr. Danger's point as well, is that the growth, there are conversations happening at the state level about the Growth Management Act itself, which is supposed to encourage us to be dense and to fill up our cities, but has made it extraordinarily difficult to build in our cities. And so there are those conversations happening at the state level. We don't know where those are going to go yet. But yeah, and you know, Michael, if you have anything else to add, but infill's not really been, I don't think, too much part of the conversation as far as our
Well, I can add a couple of things.
Yeah.
I did want to mention that Stacie and I are engaging directly with our District 42 legislators
Yes.
on some of the things like that, primarily talking with them about making ADUs easier and more affordable, making land use regulations different, so maybe changing the rules on wetlands from being a no net loss of value of wetlands to a different ecological measurement, so that it would actually just make it simpler, make it a little easier, and also would encourage and allow mitigation outside the city limits when impacts happen on the wetland inside the city limits.
That'd be huge.
Allow low quality wetlands to be filled rather than to be kept, and mitigate for that somewhere else. So we're actually directly actively engaged in that conversation with our District 42 legislators, because it is, you're right, Zeal, it's 100% a state issue. Like,
Yep.
the 300-foot buffers are not Stacie's buffers.
Yeah,
Those
no,
are
that's
state
the
buffers. Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's common, and which again, I also 100% agree. My son lives in another country because they can't, him and his girlfriend can't afford to buy a house here. Homes are, if a home's $400,000 in Blaine, the vast majority of that money, as a banker, you know, it's the value of land, it's the value of inputs, it's the value of labor, it's the cost of money to develop that, the infrastructure and things like that drive that. If you had a $400,000 house and the city had no development review, connection, or impact fees, the cost of that $400,000 house would be $380,000. I don't think it's the city's fees that really are the driving factor. It is the cost of housing is expensive. But the other item that I wanted to mention is that what you're talking about, those kind of things with the city being more proactive, is what I've seen in my 15 years here, a lot of it in Stacie's shoes. She looks better in it than I do, but the city council members are not supported by the public comment and the output from the community to take bold initiatives towards density and allowing cottage housing and those kinds of things. What they hear, what I've seen over and over again, is the fairly standard comment of not in my backyard, and why would you do that here? And so you also have to really appreciate that, like, while those are really valid possibilities and they could make differences and they could make housing more available and affordable in our community, if you have 7 folks who make these decisions, hearing from 100 people who say no, 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 don't do it, and maybe a handful of people saying, okay, go ahead, it's tough for them to kind of keep the political will make those changes. It's just, that's what I've seen over and over again. I don't disagree with what you're saying, it's hard for them to go that way.
That's the problem, because the people who want to move here don't have an address and they have no, right? So it's not, the existing people push. I mean, that's happened in BC. I'm from New Zealand originally, and New Zealand, the federal government, they changed all the land use recently for the whole country because they're just sick of people saying no, 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 no.
Yeah, and I think probably a lot of it is they just haven't seen it done right.
Yeah.
And so they think it's just going to be a bunch of identical little houses on a little street, and it's just going to be an eyesore. And what they haven't seen is, you know, all the little cobblestone streets and all the beautiful little cottages, and each one is different, and the walking paths and access to water. So I think that, you know, maybe it's an education, or maybe it's, you know, it's a picture's worth 1,000 words, but it seems to me that we always talk about the same thing, affordable housing, but there's some ways to do it other than just Habitat for Humanity and, you know, those type of land trust opportunities. So, yeah, I just, it would be fun to put together a committee of citizens that can kind of work on it from a different standpoint other than just, you know, kind of the standard.
Well, and maybe include some of the people that, like you're talking about, right, who have always been kind of opposed.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, maybe that's the way to do it, is get people from different groups together.
At least sit down and talk.
Yeah, you can preach to the choir you want, but you really want to get people in the, that say, that's going to be terrible.
And these guys are the guys that actually do it, you know, the guys that are actually, we don't want to be political, we want to talk to the builders. I mean, if we've got a problem making affordable housing, let's talk to who builds the homes. Instead of sit around in a circle, make a decision, then lay it on them, then they look back at us and go, scratch your heads again, you know? We all got to be on the same page. And if we're not on the same page, it's going to be trouble, because we got so much growth going on coming to this town right now. I don't know how to scale it. You know, we look at it right now like, wow, it's Stacie. I mean, we're all like, whoa, what if next year it's double that? What do we do then? You know, I mean, you could say what if to ever. So I guess one thing you really got to watch here, and which could happen, is the scale that we're going. You know, because we can only do so much. I know we have so much water, we have so much powers, we have so many people. But if we're smart about this, we'll get ahead of it. And we've got to listen to the developers, the good ones, not the ones that want to shove money in their pockets. I mean, they are making a living too. People have problems making money around here, then they shouldn't be here. I mean, you gotta live. You want affordable housing? You gotta make some house, or you gotta make some money. This guy right here, I've known him from Bank over there, great, good head, and he's a perfect example of how do I get ahead here? How do I get into this town? He knows a ton of people around here that I'm sure would love to live here. And it's the meat and potatoes. You can talk all you want, but we need meat and potatoes out of the council, the city, the chamber, and I think this is a great start. I think we got a good crew in here, and I think you'll see this grow once you start communicating. But if it becomes, well, the council wants this wants that, we've got to somehow get this in a circle. Because a lot of times I swear, we all want it, but it's so hard to get everybody in the same room. You know, there's a law, you can't do this, a law, you can't do that. You're gonna hear me scream and bitch about stuff like that a little. But hey, we got a lot coming at us right now, and we need to take care of it. And this city's got a lot of pressure on it right now, and these guys got to perform. So I hope it's not all talk. What's going on here? There's been a lot of talk before, and we need action. We need people to get out there, to not once a week show up, every day. I don't see a problem with that. If I sit here 10 years from now and look back and say, God, you guys remember when they were all coming? Everybody was coming. We missed it again. Why did we miss it? Same old thing. No one wants to be involved. I mean, you can talk, but get your feet in the ground. Get involved. Go ahead, John.
Yeah.
Well, in Ferndale, that's where my main office is, and I've never really part of Ferndale, but we had a catalyst program that was for housing and commercial
Right.
in the downtown core, and it was really successful. We got 3, for sure 2 projects that are going to be amazing. But I wonder if there could be something like that in the city of Ferndale, where to address the small affordable housing, where you do waive fees, because fees. They always say, oh, the developers take that money. Well, it goes right down to the affordable housing. In fact, there's other countries that you can build a house for what we pay for in fees. There's countries where you have $50,000, you can build a house for $50,000, but we spend $30,000 just in permit fees. I wonder if there could be some catalyst type program for affordable housing where you have to pass a criteria, a certain amount of things that it would benefit. And I love this idea. We talked about this. I think this is the most amazingly cool idea.
And amazingly, the density is a bigger relief than the fees.
What if we waived fees and waived some taxes for a few years and made it so
They do have a property tax exemption program downtown.
in Blaine?
Yeah, it's actually pretty good, because I mean, I proposed a project out there.
Yep, the multifamily tax exemption. Yep.
Yeah, so the city's actually got some good ideas, just, I think my point is, the community has decided to get behind it or not.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up because it's fun.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you,
Absolutely. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you.